So I will call the meeting to order, and it is so nice to see real people with real faces in our gallery tonight for the special presentation of our ambassador program. So welcome everyone, and we will get to our ambassadors very shortly here. We do recognize as a council that we meet on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE Nation. With respect to the agenda, we do have the addition of item I-2, which is the report from our Finance Committee. With that, I believe that's the only addition. Is that correct? Okay, so with that, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Runge, so moved. Councillor Paul, second. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And then the regular council meeting minutes of March 1st. Councillor Runge. Well, let's get it on the floor first. So are you moving it then as well? Okay, Councillor Runge, Councillor Rudenberg second. Go ahead, Councillor Runge.
Yeah, thank you. We just need a small adjustment on page 9 of 88. The last paragraph in the adjournment, I think we have to correct the date to March 1st and the ending time to 7:35.
Okay, so the minutes as amended. Anything else? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, and without further ado, it is my privilege and pleasure to have the opportunity to have our current ambassadors join us in the room and our future potential ambassadors join us in the room. I want to say a few words about the program. This program is a very important program to our community as a youth development program. Council consistently affirms its support for the program with our annual funding to it and our long-term funding to it as well. But the program couldn't run without the work of the volunteers and Rose and your team. And in particular, I think the last couple of years have been a real struggle for all of us on many fronts, and in this program notwithstanding. So we haven't had the luxury over the last couple of years of getting to know the ambassadors the way we normally do. I normally get to see them at all of the community events, and I know that you've been involved in the community in many ways, in many creative ways, and so we do appreciate that, and we think that that's vital, and we look forward to whoever ends up wearing the ambassador banner in the coming year to get back to more of a normal event. In fact, I attended my first full occupancy event, Chamber of Commerce dinner, a couple of weekends ago, and I had completely forgotten how to get my butterflies flying in formation as I stood up in front of a live audience of about 120 people. So I look forward to seeing the growth and development in all of you as we get back engaged in our community. And of course, the sponsors. And I see a number of our sponsors represented here tonight. It is important that you play that role in bringing our youth into programs like this through your sponsorship, and that doesn't go unnoticed and is very much appreciated as well. So tonight what we're going to do is ask our outgoing, isn't that sad? Just don't start crying now. Leave it for the final night. Just save it all up. So our outgoing ambassadors, what I'm going to ask you to do, and we'll do it the same way we did the last couple of years to maintain your cohort, is I will invite you as the current ambassadors to come up, and then you can sort out the pinning. And I know Rose has talked this through with you and the Rose presentation, and that way we keep it as a separate process. Each of the incoming candidates, you'll have the opportunity to say a few words too. So maybe do a little bit of thinking. It's your first opportunity just to say a few words in a public way. And then we'll ask the outgoing ambassadors to say a few words. And it's one of the things that we really get to see the evolution and many of the candidates from those first tentative words that they speak in a public event to being our outgoing ambassadors and the poise that they do have. So you'll get an opportunity to see that here tonight. That doesn't mean that some of the incoming can't already do public speaking. So if you want to give a 5 or 10 minute speech, please don't. We've got a big agenda to get through tonight, but you can say a few words, okay? So our outgoing ambassadors, and again, our thanks to you, Janaea DeMay, Jesse Johal, and Naylene Runge. Come on up. Okay, and so what we'll do is I'll be calling them up in the order I've been provided with. You can put that in front of Councillor Vic's area there if you want. And then the pins are here, the roses are here, okay? And if you just slide a tiny bit that way, there we go. And this is our first time doing this with all these bells and whistles and technology. And so just for clarification, I'm going to keep my mic on. By keeping my mic on, it keeps the camera this way, right? So do you want the young women to move a little bit? That's good? Okay, so we'll do that. And then there's a mic here if one of you want to grab it at some point so that it can be handed to the candidate to say a few words, right? Okay, so you've each got your stuff to do, but maybe bring this over there, and then we'll hand the mic then, one of the ambassadors will hand the mic to the candidate after you're pinned and have your sashes and everything, okay? So with that, sponsored by Rocky Peak Outfitters, Nevaeh Kuber. And for those who want pictures, we'll line them up, and then you can get pictures. Have you got something you want to give too?
She's sponsored.
Yeah, yeah, but is the hat something? Okay, you can come up as well once we get to pictures. Yeah, see, you've created a stir. Mm-hmm. Did I hear the sponsors are going to give a speech too? You can tell us how you get cars looking so good. We'll all be interested.
Just turn the video so I can actually get a picture of you shooting that.
Oh.
Do you want me to like redo it?
It's probably.
Or fix it a little bit?
Yes.
Right.
Oh.
Just very slowly.
Have to do it again.
I'm good at delegating. I'm gonna take pictures this way right now.
And actually, if you ladies turn around, the camera facing this way will capture the board.
There we go.
There we go. That's what
Yeah, I'm glad that they don't let bald men in. That looks like that would hurt a lot. Okay, so why don't you swing to this side of the ambassadors, right just in front of this piece of paper here, and turn and face, and then if you want to say a few words of introduction of yourself.
There we go.
Okay. Hello, my name is Nevaeh Kuber. I've joined the Ambassador Program to gain leadership skills as well as make friends in the program.
Great. That's perfect. Now, do you want the sponsor to come up? We do often, if sponsors are in the room. Yes, please come on up. That's a command from your worship or whatever the heck I am here. Come on. And then if you just stand, so Nevaeh, if you, yeah, okay, that works too. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you very much and good luck. Next, we have Judea Crossmans. The sponsor is Wizards Garage. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's fine. Yep. No, it's Rhea is wanting them to turn a little bit, so. Rose, maybe what we can do one time is, like, because we've got all this and because we broadcast, is maybe actually do a little bit of a dry run for your ambassadors so that they actually get to see it for next go-around, right? So they're oriented.
We just always just blame it on you.
I know. Well, and maybe next time it will be my fault. It's actually Councillor Rudenberg we usually get up there pinning. Great. Okay, and Judea, same thing, if you want to come up and say a few words of introduction.
Hi, I'm Jada Crossman, and I joined the program to gain new skills and make new friendships.
Thank you. And your sponsor's going to come up. Judea, come on back. Why don't you sneak in between there. There we go. Jada. Oh, sorry, I'm saying that. Yeah, my apologies. Jada Crossman. Next is Marley Conlon. West Central Pipe is the sponsor. There we go. Okay, and Marley, come on up. Oh.
My name is Marley Conlon, and I joined the Ambassadors Program to learn new skills and to make new friends.
And Wes is our sponsor. Wes. I thought I saw you back there at one point. Jump in there. Yep. Great. Next is Olivia Trimble. M. Daniels Consulting is the sponsor. Turn a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Rose. Don't forget to get your rose. There we go.
Hi, I'm Olivia Trimble, and I joined the Quesnel Ambassador Program to be a part of the community.
Great. Thank you. And is there a sponsor rep? Great. Terrific. And last but not least, and it's Daria, is that right?
Daria.
Daria. I have a phonetical spelling here. So Daria Brown-Miller, sponsor Rotary Club of Quesnel.
Hello, my name is Daria Brown-Miller, and I joined the program to get more involved with my community and learn new skills.
Excellent, thank you. Nope, stay up here. Come on all the way into the back here so the ambassadors are in the picture with you as well. Yeah, in between, yeah, perfect. Great, thank you. And now, outgoing ambassadors, do you want to say a few words? You've still got some work to do prior to really being outgoing, but go ahead.
Hello, I'm Jan Dumais, Quesnel 2021 Ambassador. I would like to thank you for having us. I would also like to say I'm very proud of our candidates for speaking because they were not prepared for that. So good for them jumping into that. And I'm super proud of them to have them here. And I'm excited for them to walk away with new tools in their toolbox.
Hi, I'm Jessie Johal, Quesnel Ambassador of 2021. I'm excited to see the candidates grow and learn new things. Have fun and don't stress. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Naylene Runge, Quesnel Ambassador of 2021, and I'm so proud of each of you for becoming new larvae. Join this program. You're going to make great friends and great memories and learn so many amazing skills that you're going to use for the rest of your lives. I'd like to thank you, the city, for welcoming us today, and I'm so excited to see what the future holds. Thank you.
And Rose, do you want to say a few words? No?
Thank you for having us today. It is exciting to be at an event and to be at
Absolutely.
tonight. So thank you for that.
Terrific. And I look forward, Rose and I were just chatting, I look forward to spending some time with the candidates in the near future here, and we can chat about the community and what council's doing. So I look forward to that too. Thank you all. Thank you to the sponsors. Very much appreciated. And you're all welcome to be here for our main agenda. So, but if you are going to be leaving, do feel free to just head out. I only ask you not to congregate in the immediate area here. You can go beyond the doors to the stairwell, and then we won't hear if you want to stick around and chat, okay? Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out. Okay, we've got lots to get through, so we'll get started. So first up, committee reports, Policy and Bylaw Committee Chair, Councillor Runge.
Thank you very much. And as you guys see, you are going to be blessed with two fine reports today. So I guess I should put my old shades on here. So the first report actually was or could have come up last meeting, and it really is just a summary of what was done, what was brought up last time with our chief building official Kevin Hicks with regards to the step code and what happened and all the discussions that we had. So PABCOM, of course, suggested the step code staff report, and it was addressed at our March 1st meeting. So I think this is really just for FYI, your information only. The second report actually comes a little quicker to you guys than normal, and it was from last Thursday's report, and it's coming to you because we do have a little bit of some time issue things that we'd like to actually hopefully discuss a little bit. Anyway, the first one is this report is to inform council of what was discussed at the Policy and Bylaw Committee on March 10th, and our summary, of course, is the floodplain bylaw. So we reviewed the city's current floodplain management bylaw with the current legislation and regulations. We heard recommendations to amend the bylaw, and we reviewed other community policies and discussed general exemptions. It was a fairly long and in-depth meeting, and the recommendations are listed below. I guess we could go to those first. So that we just add general exemptions to the bylaw as recommended, and they will come, I think, in a future time because I noticed that the table wasn't listed below. And number two, that we add a section that allows a specific exemption where a hardship exists with a registered professional report, and a section 219 covenant, and based on the list of specific submissions, and that we do not include neighborhood exemptions in our flood plain bylaw. And then number four, that we add section to specify that areas impacted by the Dragon Lake Dam must confirm that the development will not increase the consequence of the level of the dam. And then the final thing that we talked about was that we ultimately give the designation of an approving officer with regards to, that all the discussions go through an approving officer with appeals processes coming up to council if there was an appeal required. And the second thing, the second summary we had was the comprehensive street traffic and parking bylaw, and we discussed the consideration of adding a sweeping to the downtown core to the requirements of section 11 of the city's street traffic parking bylaw, similar to the Moose Jaw clean sidewalks. And this is actually going to be addressed a little bit further on in this meeting under staff reports. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Maybe Director Turner, when would the actual floodplain bylaw be brought forward based on the recommendations from PABCOM? When would it be brought to council?
We're hoping in the next couple of council meetings.
Yeah.
We really would like it done before too long before the summer construction season, so we're hoping so, but we just got to draft the bylaw now and get some review on it. Because
I think that's the best context for the recommendations would be when we actually get the bylaw in front of us and the staff report that goes with it. There were just some questions asked of PABCOM as to what's the general direction staff should take. But if there are any questions, either staff or the chair can speak to that. Seeing none, I would note, if you're paying attention to what's going around in the province, the province is really pushing municipalities to get their act together around floodplain. We're actually talking to one of the ministries about a potential development, and they have no concept of how far ahead of the game we are on the floodplain hazard assessment we've done. So we are leading in the province on getting this work done, getting it into the bylaw, and making it, that clarification that people need as a river city. So kudos to staff for advancing this. Okay. Anything there? Okay. Thank you, Chair Runge. Next is the additional item that we got, the late-breaking report from FSAC, the Finance Committee. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a report on the latest Finance Committee meeting on March 9th. So a few topics that we discussed, deficit, surplus, and reserves report. The committee reviewed the surplus report, deficit and reserves, but Director Bolton will be bringing that report extensively shortly here. The proposed budget changes report, same thing as well. Director Bolton has a report on that coming up. The finance update, the auditors are currently at the city doing the annual audit. They're still here. No, they're gone. They're long gone now. And the Bear Smart standard financial expense, the FSAC reviewed cost to the proposed test trial of locking mechanisms for garbage cans. At this point, $2,000 is already built in to the operating budget for the regular Bear Aware program, and the committee felt that the trial was not needed at this time. So at this point, I'd move receipt, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we don't need to move receipt. So any questions or comments for the finance chair? And as he indicated, the 2 substantive reports are in your package. Okay, thank you. The CRD board highlights speak for themselves. You will note that as with ourselves, the idea of cultural sensitivity training, First Nations associated cultural training for the CRD is being proposed by their First Nations Relations Committee. And of course, we discussed in our budget revisiting that. We did have it budgeted, but because of COVID and various other reasons, we haven't done some of that training. So we'll continue to advance ours, and the board continues to trickle out some of its COVID funding to some of the hard-hit community associations as they try and maintain halls, et cetera, with no bookings. So that's mostly what that represents, is just keeping some of these community associations that have halls whole while they get back to being able to do the rentals again. So if there's any questions on the board highlights, I'd be happy to answer them. Seeing none, then we'd move into our first staff report. And it's our 2021 surplus/deficit. George, you're listening now? You're ready to take notes? Inside joke. Go ahead, Director Bolton.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to review the 2021 surpluses and deficits for the city's operating funds. So the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee reviewed this report at their last meeting and approved the recommendations to council. So after operating and capital carry forwards, the general surplus for 2021 is $418,832 before the adjustment for landfill liability. Now, one of the reasons this actually ended up being more than we thought was that we got a new estimate for the RCMP retro wages. It went down about $200,000 from our original estimate, and it was mostly due to, originally they told us they'd be charging us on the amount of members we have now, but now they're going to go back and charge us based on the number of members we had in each year, which makes more sense. So the total cost, which we've got all accrued, is $834,000, and we expect in 2022 we'll find out for sure what the final amount is and how we're going to pay it. The water and sewer fund surpluses are always kept at 6 months of expenses. Any excess funds always just get right into the reserves. The airport had a surplus, but that was due to COVID grants that they received, and these COVID grants are needed to get through 2022 without having to put extra taxation to the airport to fund it. Transit had a surplus of $90,000, and forestry had a surplus of just under $10,000. Solid waste this year had a surplus for $157,000. That's the first time that this function has had a surplus. Note this is just operating costs. It doesn't cover all the capital costs and the landfill liability to close the landfill at some point, but it is just shows the change of how our landfill fees have changed over the years. So I've included a summary. And then there's also some operating carry forwards that I'm asking council to do a resolution on, just because normally operating carry forward funds have been spent partly, and I'm just carrying forward the rest. But in this case, neither one of them have been spent yet, so that's why I'm asking council's permission. $50,000 is for derelict properties that we had in 2021 that weren't spent, but the city's currently working on a number of properties that will likely need these funds for, so I'm asking that they be carried forward. Another was $50,000 that we had in capital planning. We've got a lot of projects on the go, Labordier Park planning, infrastructure planning, so again, I'm asking that the $50,000 be carried forward to next year. So the recommendation is that council make the following allocations from the 2021 surplus. $117,777 to the capital reinvestment fund to cover the because we were under an asphalt patching, so that makes sense for it to go to that reserve, and any remaining amount to the tax and community stabilization reserve. And the council approved the following operative funds be carried forward into 2022: $50,000 for derelict properties and $50,000 for capital planning.
Okay, so maybe I'll just open the floor first to see if anybody has any questions about these, because this is one that we can parse out as well for standalone resolutions if need be. So are there any questions or comments on the recommendations from Director Bolton on this? Go ahead, Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Bolton, with regards to the RCMP accrual of $834, have we got a reserve account that's going to help us with that expense?
So that expense has all been accrued, so the money's all set aside and waiting for the bill.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this? So seeing none, I would suggest, go ahead, sorry, Councillor Rinberg and then Councillor Runge.
Thank you, and it is actually around the RCMP piece. And it was one of my questions I was going to ask was, at what stage do they tax or charge us for? So they're just back charging over the number of years, the people that we had. So thank you for that. So, I mean, it makes the bite a little less onerous, but it's still, $800,000 is still a lot of money. And I know that FCM and UBCM are still pushing the feds. So it's not a dead conversation yet, but it is still out there.
Great, thank you. And that letter has gone off on behalf of council to have this covered. And again, we would then bring something back to council if, it did happen or in some manner they came up with 50% or whatever, then we would just come back to council with what council would like to do with that found money. Councillor Runge?
Yes, thank you. So my comment is on page 18 of 88 with regards to the gas tax funds. That's a really, and I'm looking at the estimated to December 22, the last column there.
Yeah, we've got some big projects coming out of this year, the landfill berm, the West Fraser Timber Park trails, there's Bike Park Phase 2, there's some towards the Labordier Park shade. There's just quite a lot of projects coming out of it this year.
All right, thank you.
And again, those are all approved based on our capital plan, so. Okay, anything else? So seeing that no one seems to have any issues, then I would invite your motion for the full recommendation then. So Councillor Elliott moves the full recommendation, seconded Councillor Vic. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Runge.
So later in our report, we have some other stuff with the budget. Are these interrelated?
Only insofar that some recommendations are being made, for example, around the landfill revenue and so on. They're not interlinked. Passing one doesn't do anything to the next one.
So with regards to using all the money as assigned just this way, there's also, on the later one, there's a discussion on some other options?
Two separate reports. That's why they're coming forward as separate agenda items.
Thank you.
They're not,
as long as they're not interrelated, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, next up then, the administration report on the OCP and zoning amendment bylaws. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would just like to declare a conflict on this one, and we'll leave the room. I'm in a conflict because we rent the bottom space. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Director Turner, on 668 Doherty Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose is to provide second reading to the amendment of the official community plan and zoning bylaw to allow the conversion of a 2-level commercial complex to become a 3-level apartment at 668 Doherty Drive. On November 23rd, Council considered the development proposal and expressed concern regarding the size of the units, lack of storage within the units, and lack of bike storage. Although we provided first reading and allowed the proponent to come back with some discussion on those matters. The proponent reviewed the plans, made some adjustments, and refined their justification letter for this development stating the need for smaller units in the community. Staff are recommending I know, sir, I'll get to the recommendations in a minute, but I would just like to say that the dwelling sizes are between 305 and 756 square feet. Although the units are small, they do meet the spatial requirements of the BC Building Code. Each unit has a minimum of 1 closet for storage, and covered bike storage is located at the back of the building. The last 2 were amendments and clarifications that were made based on the comments that were provided. Staff are recommending at this time to require the proponent to hold a public information session prior to coming back for public hearing. When there's a bit of uncertainty about a project like that, we are thinking that is a best practice to have the proponent themselves go out. We will give them guidance and talk to them about how we will schedule that with the public hearing, but to have that direct conversation with their neighbors and the community. And second, we'll be asking to provide second reading of the proposed OCP and zoning bylaw and setting a public hearing date. Formally, the recommendation is that under the bylaw section of the agenda, Council provides second reading of the proposed official community plan amendment bylaw number 1912 and zoning amendment bylaw number 1913, and sets the public hearing date for May 3rd, 2022 in Council chambers at 6 p.m. to allow the use of residential apartments in a commercial area on Lot F, District Lot 704, Cariboo District Plan 5008, and the Council considers the consultation requirements set at the November 23rd, 2021 Council meeting, and further require that the proponent hold a public information session prior to the public hearing that must be advertised to all businesses and residents within 100 meter of the subject property.
Okay, questions or comments first before we go to the recommendation? Councillor Paul?
Yeah, just one little item, and that is on recommendation number 2. Excuse me, it says that the proponent must notify all businesses and residents. I would suggest that we would want to put owners in there as well, in case there is an absentee owner.
Thank you. That's always a requirement for the public hearing. Yes, sorry. We will probably talk with the proponent about jointly advertising this too, but we just, depending on the dates, that may or may not take place. But we will definitely make sure that tenants and owners are notified.
Okay, any other further questions or comments? Okay, anyone wish to move the recommendation then? Councillor Runge, so.
I just was going to have a comment first, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm looking at this. I looked at all the extra readings and things like that, and I like the idea of the small units. I think they're great. I just think we also have to tread lightly here. I'd like to propose somewhere along this process that we also have an accessibility committee look at the doors, the sizes of those doors with regards to wheelchair accessibility issues with regards to...
No, sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. We don't have an accessibility committee. We don't get them to review private developer proposals. That would be bad practice, and it's not appropriate. So go ahead, Director Turner.
Thank you. There are requirements under the building code, and they will have to meet those requirements.
Perfect. And so then they'd meet. I guess what I'm worried about, and I'm not. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I hope it doesn't happen. But should we have a number, like a lot of, when I was reading the reports, a lot of the micro dwellings suggested dwelling sizes shared with bigger dwelling sizes and smaller dwelling sizes, so you don't, so the clients are, so we don't get ourselves into an issue, you know, a policing issue or anything like that could happen from a small, tightly knit community with no.
So again, Councillor, I would caution you to be careful to keep the role that you've got. And the role you've got is to simply say that this is sufficient to go to public hearing. We're adding another level to that, saying that the proponent should also hold a public information session. We do not review private developers' proposals to the level of scrutiny you're suggesting, nor do we suggest to them practices that are other than building code practices that are required.
All right, my apologies.
So be careful.
I'll take
Councillor
that back.
Turner, Director Turner.
Thank you. And we should note that the proponent has and probably very rightly so, has noted that there's a number of agencies, including BC Housing, CMHC, a number of agencies in Vancouver, which is, and many other communities that are going to more micro and smaller suites to try and fill a need in communities for smaller units.
Okay. Our role in this case is to say that this is sufficient based on the recommendation of staff to take to the public for public input. That's our job tonight. If we don't think it's ready and it doesn't meet our needs, then you can vote against that. Okay. So, Councillor Rundberg. Moving the recommendation. Seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Vic. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, take the vote. All those in favor? Sorry, I had a momentary lapse there. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And then we will deal with the bylaw in the bylaw section. So we'll just pause for a moment. Okay, next item, K3, the 150 time immemorial grant, Director Norburn. We've been very curious about time immemorial.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to accept funding from the 150 time immemorial. It's a fund to reduce the city's contribution toward the cost of interpretive signage on the Riverfront Trail and to expand the project to add additional signs in locations off the trail and 6 photo murals in public locations around Quesnel as part of the city's placemaking initiative. The city was successful in obtaining up to $49,330 under the Cultural Heritage Awareness stream of the program, intended to bring to the forefront suppressed, untold, or forgotten stories from underrepresented or marginalized groups to build a more complete and balanced story of BC. Of that amount, approximately $35,547 of that is allocated to updating and producing the interpretive signage along the Riverfront Trail, and the balance towards the production of 6 photo murals similar to the panels installed on the front of the museum and visitor center to be installed in public places around town. Although not specified in the grant application, it would be beneficial if the city were to include a small portion of funding approved for the Riverfront Trail project to cover the cost of updating the older interpretive signs on historic buildings in downtown Quesnel. Many of these are weathered, and updating them will provide an opportunity to install new signs that are consistent with the city's branding. Estimated to be about $3,500 for the 21 signs. The recommendation is that Council authorize staff to accept the 150 time immemorial grant, CHA, I don't know what that is, Activating Heritage in Community grant for up to $49,330 for the production and installation of interpretive signs and photo murals.
Councillor Elliott moves, seconded Councillor Rudenberg. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the report. I'm excited for this to be moving forward. It was a surprise. I didn't expect to see this grant. But as far as the interpretive signage, I think it's really important to get that going, just to be representative of our whole community. And as a bonus to have the 6 photo murals, I think is great for the community as well. I brought up the possibility in the, excuse me, in the Finance Committee of having a mural program moving forward, but it was found at this time that maybe under our constraints and where we are with the budget that the timing wasn't perfect, so maybe someone can have that conversation after the next election. But to see this moving forward as well, it kind of attains the goals that I was hoping for.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, on the recommendation then, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Prior to going to Director Bolton for the next report, just because of Councillor Runge's question about K1 and now we're moving on to K4, it is our practice to stagger staff reports, and you'll notice that we're now going to go back through the second rotation of staff, and that's so that we don't put a staff member in a position where they're doing multiple reports, because there are times Director Turner comes in here and has 5 or 6 reports, and so as long as they are standalone, unrelated, that's our practice of staggering through the staff reports. That's why the 2 budget reports are separate from each other. Okay, Director Bolton.
So the purpose of this report is to discuss some potential changes to the budget 2022 that have come to light after closing the year end for 2021. So the Financial Sustainable and Audit Committee reviewed this report at their March 9th meeting and approved presenting 2 options to Council for discussion. So the potential changes could result in reducing the increase to total taxation by 1.23%, or somewhere in between if Council chooses to hedge the increasing fuel and inflation costs in the budget. So the changes include reducing the taxation required for transit. So the transit fund, as was noted in the other report, consistently has been having a surplus. So we can safely lower the budget for that by $50,000 and still be good, we believe. Eliminating the need to fund the solid waste function by taxation for operating costs. So again, as noted in the other report, solid waste did not actually had a surplus. So I had forecasted higher landfill revenue, but I think I didn't forecast high enough. We can go higher based on what happened in 2021. So that would eliminate the taxation required for solid waste. And then setting an upper limit for the snow reserve, which would reduce the amount required to be collected in 2022. So I've given a breakdown below of how we came up for a max amount for the snow reserve. So we looked at the 2022 budget and thought that 30%, based on our history of snow collection, is probably enough to have in the surplus at any one time. And then based on what we've already collected and what's already sitting there, we've lowered the recommendation for 2022 from 165,000 to 113,000. So all those changes plus a change to council travel reduced the budget by $221,336. But of course, since the operating budget was put in place, there's been rapid increases in fuel costs, inflation all around. We're hearing already from a whole bunch of our suppliers about fuel surcharges, increases to anything that has oil in it. It's gonna be a different year. So FSAC talked about this a bit and decided to present council with two options. So one option to reduce the 2022 operating budget by $221,336, which would bring the tax increase down to approximately 5.7%, or to make those changes, but then increase the 2022 operating budget by up to the same amount to hedge for the rapidly increasing fuel costs and inflation above normal. So those two options are there for discussion.
So just a couple of quick pointers in terms of principles. The reduction in each of the line items in the operating budget is in keeping with a basic principle for local government, is that you should only be taxing commensurate with the service that you're delivering. And so based on closing year end, which we didn't have that data when we put the proposed budget in front of council, based on closing year end, the Director of Finance is basically saying to us, our current budget is actually potentially overcharging in these areas, and so can be adjusted. If we just do the pure adjustment, then we're just correcting based on year end what our proposed taxation was for those functions, and then reducing the overall taxation down to the 5.7. The second recommendation is basically saying, because it reads funny to the general public, because it looks like you're then also lifting, and what you're actually doing is we have to change the line items because that's a budget change in our projections, but then we're saying that we would just take the difference that's created, or the proposed budget differential, and just leave it as an inflationary buffer. So we would be hedging against inflation so that we don't end up in a deficit situation, because right now, quite frankly, I don't think anybody can predict what the inflationary situation is going to be. So it would just be a hedge against that. And then if it does end up in an accrual next year, then you could deal with it at that time with respect to how it impacts taxation going forward, right? So that's a little bit of sort of context for this. Finance Committee with the Chair, Elliott, and I, we just felt that it was important that Council just didn't jump at saying, okay, the number's down at 5, right? The regional district is at 5.2. You know, the actual, and Councillor Paul raised this at the last meeting, pointing to Prince George. Prince George's actual tax that they should be imposing is 6.5%. The only reason they're down to 3 is because they're backstopping that with COVID money, and they're cutting across snow removal, roads, etc. So but their actual is 6.5. So if they were going to maintain status quo, that's what they should be taxing at, but they've got a buffer against it. So we're in that range with either scenario in terms of taxation. And really, we just felt that Council deserved the right to also say, maybe one of the options we've got is leave the budget as it is, make the internal adjustments, and hedge against inflationary pressures that it's hard for us to predict at this point. Okay? So questions, comments, beefs, bouquets, it's all yours. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you would surely expect, I would be voting for option 1, and that further down the road we can make some adjustments if necessary. But certainly option 1 heads in the direction that I was getting at the last time that we did discuss the budget.
So I want to be crystal clear, Councillor Paul, it does not. Last time you were talking about cuts to the budget, which were denied by council. This is simply an internal logic based on a proposed budget forward that, based on closing last year, says we don't need to tax as much in each of those categories. This does not create a tax deficit that we need to carry into next year, and it doesn't involve any cuts to programs and services. It's an internal correction. So I just want to be clear, it's not what you were asking for at all.
Thank you, but I have the option of voting for number 1 or number 2, and my vote will be for number 1.
Yeah, and that's great, but let's make sure that the public understands the reasons. It's because you like the number better. Councillor Runge.
Just a question to Director Bolton. With regards to the snow above budget for the last 6 of the 10 years, are those the most recent years, or are those fairly evenly spread over the 10?
There were a couple right in the middle. We actually had 2 in a row that were quite high, yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is, number 1, is a 30% enough? If we've been progressing higher every year, like are the last 2 30 plus, are those in the last 2 years?
No, it's all over the place because, of course, this year we were under, right? It's very random, our snow.
Yeah, and if you look at the climate projections, it's basically we're entering a period of instability. And so, you take a look at February, March now and the rapidity of the melt, but it's not inconceivable that we could get a snow dump, the likes of which would blow a big chunk of our budget trying to move it off again, right? So it's just unpredictable. I think the 30% hedge is sufficient based on the data that we've got. Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Carrie and her team for working so hard on this. We can see a savings of $221,000 for the numerous reasons, and I understand the desire to lower that number right now to 5.7, but in effect what's happening is that 221 quite potentially is coming back to bite us next year. So what we're doing is we're lining up the next council to have to deal with that before we even talk about the regular inflation or the regular, excuse me, my throat, the regular costing. So I think that we should take that savings and we should put it directly into next year, because we don't know what's going to happen with the amount of fuel that we're purchasing and all the other things as far as inflation that are coming down the line. So if we can help ourselves for next year, I think that's exactly the direction we should be going.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Councillor Runge.
I have a question. I don't like to get into the hedging of anything because we could, if fuel changes around the world, we could actually end up at $60 or $70 oil, which could just change things also. So this hedging piece for me is a little tough. I understand that we might actually be over. Is there any option that we have an option 3 where we do half and half?
Go ahead, Director Bolton.
Absolutely. It's council's discretion where we want to go with this.
Yeah, and I would say, Councillor Runge, that one of the questions, sort of the flavor of the questions on the proposed operating budget was whether or not we were actually hedging inflation properly, like did we build it in enough? And we've posted, put inflation in predominantly, because it's our largest one, around wages, right?
Yeah, so wages are as per our collective agreement, so that's 2% that's built in, and we built in 2% on most areas. There were a couple areas that was a bit more based on where the prices have been going, but generally we've got 2% built in the budget, and we're definitely, at this point, you're right, I can't foresee what the future is going to hold for us, but right now we're seeing higher than that.
Yeah, so again, from a principled perspective, when we were doing the actual operating budget at the price tag it came for our ratepayers, people were concerned about this inflationary pressure at that time, and our response was that we would, hedge, if you will, based on that taxation and based on that nominal 2% inflation, right? So it was a vulnerability that people pointed out that we didn't have. The second piece is that we are obligated to not deficit finance. We can't post deficits, right? So if we do think that inflation is going to be much higher than 2%, then I think you do need to take a look at this opportunity to hedge and to have a bit of a reserve for that. But to your point, the reserve doesn't have to be the full amount. You can cut it out. You can think, along the lines of some portion of that going towards an inflationary pressure that we're now realizing, right? So, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify that a bit. We can have a deficit because obviously unforeseen things can happen, but we have to tax the next year to make up for it.
Yeah, I think the principle of our financing is you don't finance towards a deficit, but you have to pick it up the next year if you have to, right? So, Councillor Runberg, then Councillor.
So people see this and they go, oh, yay, 6.9 to 5.67. So what does that mean? What's that 1.23% mean on an average household tax bill? Because I think that's the piece that people will understand the most or better. And I bet you knew this question was coming, didn't you? Thanks.
We will get that for you. Well, let's go to Councillor Vic and give Director Bolton an opportunity to do the calculus.
She's going to have to look at the computer anyways for mine. No, I'm kidding. So with the inflation, I'm going to tell you, in reading this report on the weekend, my instinct is we tax for the services we're providing based on the budget. So that would put me in option one. And I understand the risk in the light of the sort of hyperinflation environment we're in today. So I guess, but my question after listening to the comments is, based on the data in the last 30 days, and I know this may be tough to answer, but how much are we sort of blowing by the budget for our fuel budget in the last 30 days based on the fuel costs today?
I cannot answer that. But I mean, you've all seen the pump. Yeah. But just, I can answer Lori-Ann's question. It's about $13 for the average house, so about $5 per 100,000.
Yeah, but I think to Councillor Vic's point, partly because it's the laggard in our billing system, right? It takes a while for invoices to go through, but you have been asking and doing a little bit of math around, on fuel use, if it increases, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just doing some straight playing with a spreadsheet, right? With the amount of fuel that we buy, if it stays where it is now, we're talking $200,000 easily, right? And that's just on our gasoline and diesel. That's not talking about like all our products that have oil in them, like the paint we buy, right? There's lots of things that it could affect. But again, I don't know where it's going to go the rest of the year, right?
Okay, Councillor Runge.
Yeah, and so I'm going to speak against Councillor Vic's comment there with regards to the fuel costs, because in the U.S., and we lag by about 30 days here in Canada, we have fuel costs that go up very, very quickly, and they're quite inelastic coming down. And so they've dropped by 10 cents. Fuel prices in the last week have dropped by $39 a barrel, which is about, I think, 40% from last week. So we have to be really careful, because if we get oil and everything coming online around the world, we will see regular, hopefully, inflation at around the 2 to 4% range, which still puts us too low for some of the things. That's why I was actually suggesting a mid-range. I actually believe that we should tax, like you said. I think we should tax with regards to the services that we offer, and that would mean that we don't hedge into the future too much. We have hedged already, but I would rather go for an option 3.
Yes, I think maybe we need to remove the term hedge. So we have reserves that we keep against future possibilities for our capital projects, for our tax stabilization community and tax stabilization account. So we do advanced planning, is what I would call it. We do advanced planning. The principle of taxing for the services you deliver is the internal adjustment in the budget. That will be done. So we won't be taxing people for these various functions at the proposed level, which frees up that money as a reserve against inflation is what it would be. It wouldn't be a technical reserve, but we would be reserving it against inflationary pressures as yet unknown. That's all you're doing. With respect to world pricing and so on, I mean, in British Columbia in particular, there seems to be no correlation between gas price at the pump and anything that's happening in the world, right? So who knows what's going to happen? The only question in front of this council is a vulnerability in our operating budget was asked by a number of councillors. What about inflation? Have you taken inflation into account, et cetera? So that's all that the Finance Committee is saying is you now have an opportunity to say, okay, maybe we buffer that inflation by not just turning this into a straight out reduction in the taxation for this year. That's all. Okay, so I think we've sort of bandied it about. We're open to any motion to be put forward on the floor.
I'll move recommendation 2.
Okay. Councillor Elliott is moving recommendation 2, which would see the entire amount to be put towards potential inflation. Seconder for that motion. Seconder for that motion, Councillor Goulet. On the motion, any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just feel that we have that savings right now, and if we don't put it forward, I mean, we could see potential savings again next year, but if we don't, we won't be taxing for this next year. So I think we should get on it now, appreciate the savings, and put it towards the budget next year. We saw what happened this year when we carried forward, when we didn't bring money forward from the year before. That's why our number is so high, is because we had to catch up to the year before. So I think this is the right direction to go to bring taxation down for next year.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Are you going to comment?
Yeah, I guess I will comment, because then I guess by putting an option on the table like this, that actually just leaves us to vote against it, or for it. And if we were to vote against it, would that mean then we would look at the other options, or is this what happens then?
Yeah, that's the normal practice,
okay, thank
right?
you.
That's the reason motions go forward, to vote for or against, and you're
yeah, but
the
motion is actually significantly, virtually the same, right? So except for slight percentages, so that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, on the motion, all those in favor of the motion number 2 as written, with the full amount going to protect us against inflation? All in favor? That motion passes. Okay, opposed, Councillor Paul? Okay, and Councillor Runge? Okay. Thank you, Director Bolton. Okay, next, back to Director Turner on the City of Quesnel Housing Agreement Authorization Bylaw.
Thank you, Council. And this report is really a housekeeping item. The purpose is to correct an error in the City of Quesnel Housing Authorization Agreement Bylaw number 1915 of 2021 by repealing the bylaw and proceeding to a new bylaw. That bylaw was put in place following a development permit approval, and the bylaw came forth to Council in November. This is for the housing agreement for the property on 109 Bowron, which is in construction now. A defect was found in the bylaw in the housing agreement document during the process of registration. This is a simply amendment to correct that defect. The recommendation is that Council, during the bylaw section, approve first 3 readings.
Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Just for clarity, do we not have to repeal it first?
Thank you. The bylaw in itself repeals it, so it's listed in the bylaw that the other bylaw is repealed.
Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, we'll deal with that in the bylaw section. Back to Director Community Services. You're going to build as a bus shelter.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval for staff to enter into an agreement with BC Transit for the purchase and installation of a new bus shelter and for the approval of funding in the 2022 capital budget for the city share of the capital cost for the shelter. So the BC Transit bus shelter program provides an opportunity for communities to obtain new bus shelters at a reduced cost through a shared costing agreement with BC Transit. Under the cost sharing formula, the city is required to contribute 20% of the actual costs to purchase and install the shelter. City staff applied to the program and were advised by BC Transit that we have been approved for one bus shelter for the bus stop at Lust Road and Bass Road, westbound. This well-utilized bus stop is on the Red Bluff route and is located outside city boundaries. Under the agreement, the city will be responsible for maintenance of the bus shelter. Currently, the city provides maintenance to all transit infrastructure on transit routes, including shelters, garbage cans, route signage, both in the city and outside city boundaries. A glass bus shelter had been previously installed at this location by the city, but was removed due to issues of vandalism. The bus shelter selected to be installed is at a location that does not, or at this location does not include glass, which is expected to reduce the risk of vandalism damage to this shelter. The estimated cost for the city's share for the purchase and installation of the shelter is $5,008.30. And the recommendation is the council authorize staff to enter into an agreement with BC Transit for the purchase and installation of one bus shelter to be located at Lust Road and Bass Road westbound with an estimated cost to the city of $5,008.30, and that the city's share of expenses for the shelter come from the transit reserve.
Okay. Questions or comments or motion from council? Okay. Councillor Vixo moves the recommendation. Councillor Runge seconds the recommendation. Any questions or comments? Councillor Runge.
Yeah, just a comment. We could actually make the estimated cost 5,000. It's just an estimated cost.
You're hedging your bets again.
Thank you for sharing that piece of wisdom with us. Anyway, other than that, the motion's on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, and then back to Director Turner for the Comprehensive Street Traffic Parking Amendment Bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is consider adding policy to require businesses to sweep and remove dust and debris from their sidewalks in the downtown core, similar to the snow clearing policy. The Quesnel Downtown Business Association has requested the policy to have property owners clear and sweep sidewalks in the downtown. No similar policies were found in BC. However, a similar policy was found in Moose Jaw's Clean Sidewalks bylaw. Decisions on timelines for when streets should be swept are required. Staff recommend maintaining a 10 a.m. time frame. The Policy and Bylaw Committee reviewed the staff report, seeking direction on this change at our March 10th meeting and recommended proceeding to council for further discussion. A draft bylaw amendment is prepared. And I'll leave it for discussion maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this is at the direct request of the Downtown Association that we advance this, so questions or comments on the recommendation? Again, we can deal with it in the bylaw section. Councillor Paul.
Thank you. This bylaw is for removal of whether it be snow, ice, dust, litter, etc. Removal, does that really mean just sweeping it off of the street onto the, or pardon me, off of the sidewalk onto the street? Is that what we're looking for? Or are we looking to have the merchant actually pick up the dust and the debris and the litter?
Thank you. And that would be discussion with our bylaw as we go through enforcing this bylaw. We've had that discussion. Definitely when you're talking about dirt, and they do sort of expect that it would be swept to the streets and that it would be taken away by street cleaning at whatever times. In terms of debris, I think there'd be some expectation that you'd cleaned up stuff that was going to look bad in the roadway as well. But we'll have those discussions in enforcement with the Downtown Business Association as well as the businesses.
Go ahead, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, so what we're saying is we really do miss Dennis.
But But again, that's for the public spaces, and so when we did meet with the Downtown Association, I was there, and Councillor Runge there as the liaison. They're wanting this to be put in place in advance of their April cleanup. Quite frankly, some of the issues that they've got are with the larger corporate entities that are down there, not the owner-operator businesses, and they just needed something with a little bit of teeth, because that often equips those managers to then get the permission that they need to get the resources they need. So in terms of the intent and the desire, I think we're all of a kind to keep downtown as clean as possible and warrant that investment we made. And we're working with the Downtown Association vis-a-vis Dennis, on our public spaces. And that's something that we're working with our summer student program and our quality control with Public Works, et cetera. So we'll do our part as well. Councillor Runge.
Yes, thank you. So my question is actually with regards to that, our public spaces are like, will this also be a requirement of the city to have it cleaned by 10 o'clock in the morning, the Four Corners and all those areas? And then for me, if those are required by 10 o'clock, is there an associated cost with us to do that before 10 o'clock?
City Manager.
Thank you. No, that has not been discussed as far as setting a time on when city does its own operations. It just hasn't been discussed. We do try to get it on a regular and timely basis. So.
Okay. Any further?
Well, just with regards to bylaws, are we bound by this as a city? Are we bound by that same bylaw?
That's the question being asked. Director Turner.
Thank you. And just to be clear, this is the streets and traffic. This is the fuller, larger bylaw. There's just a couple of regulations within that bylaw, and definitely that bylaw does give waivers to city forces. I mean, we have a lot of things to do, so we do not hold our, we do not, we're not required at the same time frames for sure.
Yep. Our forces, for example, in a catastrophic snow event, our snow forces will be keeping roads open, right? So we're not bound by this. If we're having a consistent snow event, then consistently we will be keeping roads open and then getting to sidewalks when we can on a priority basis.
And I understand that. The point is that we're now moving past the snow. We're moving to the debris and the garbage.
But same principle applies. Same principle. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Vick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the appropriate time in the agenda, I'll be supporting this amendment to the bylaw. I think we have a tremendous asset in downtown, and specifically, we spent $6 million in the last 5 years in updating a major street there. And I think this will be good practice to encourage everyone who borders the sidewalk to keep a clean space. And for those that have trouble remembering that, then there's a mechanism now to remind them. So I think that's the intent of this, not to be overly punitive. It's just as a tool to remind. And on that basis, I think this is a good adjustment to the bylaw.
Great, thank you. So we'll deal with the amendment in the bylaw section. If there's no further comments, we'll move on. Okay, thank you, Director Turner. And the council information package, no items were asked to be brought forward. With respect to correspondence, Ms. Hartley? Moving too fast for you?
We received correspondence from Youth Pathways to Gold Society, a nonprofit partisan organization asking for some support from us. A request for a letter of support forwarded to Premier John Horgan, the Tourism Minister, Melanie Mark, and Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Minister, Murray Rankin, urging them to provide New Pathways to Gold Society with ongoing core funding.
Thank you. Does any council member wish to recuse themselves at this point? Councillor Paul?
I don't feel that I need to recuse myself. I don't have any personal gain from any of this.
Actually, I mean, I turn it to the city manager, but the one area that we've all been advised to recuse ourselves is when we are acting as board members of other boards, and you're named as a board member.
I will go along with that then.
thank you. And in the future, when we've got people like Cisco and others, I would advise that you don't ask questions about another board that you're a member of and ask a Cisco if they would consider funding a trail under this as well. So it goes beyond just this item. Okay, so thank you for recusing yourself. Okay, so on the request, can I have a motion, please, to send a letter of support? Councillor Vic, Councillor Runge, so moved. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Goulet, could you just ask? Okay, it's okay. No.
You're down there, I heard your voice.
Okay, moving on to the bylaw section, Bylaw 1912, Official Community Plan Amendment. This is with respect to 668 Doherty.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead. Yeah, I think for these two, if you wish to step out for both of those, yeah.
So moved.
Okay, Councillor Elliott so moves. Councillor Vic second. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And then the same property, Bylaw 1913, but the zoning amendment bylaw. Now, yeah, and in both cases, sorry, the public hearing dates as well. So I should have mentioned that the first time. Councillor Rudenberg so moved. Councillor Elliott second. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. With respect to the City of Quesnel Council Procedure Bylaw, final adoption. Sorry. Oh, yeah.
Too fast.
Great. So the City of Quesnel Council Procedure Bylaw, final adoption. Councillor Elliott so moved. Councillor Rudenberg second. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Bylaw 1921, City of Quesnel Housing Agreement Authorization Bylaw, first, second, and third readings. And as Councillor Elliott pointed out, the repeal is embedded in this of the previous one. Okay. Councillor Runge so moved. Councillor Goulet second. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And then Bylaw 1923, City of Quesnel Comprehensive Street Traffic and Parking Amendment Bylaw, first, second, and third readings. Councillor Runge, seconded Councillor Vic. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay. We have no changes to upcoming meetings or committee appointments. Any announcements, future events? Councillor Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My fellow Rotarians at this table may be a little bit surprised at what I'm about to say, and that is that with our Rotary Club, we're we will be announcing a project called Sunflowers for Ukraine, and we've had a very generous donor contribute 2,500 pre-packaged, pre-printed packages of seeds that we will be selling in the community. An announcement will be coming out probably within the next 2 or 3 days.
Great, thank you. Councillor Rudenberg?
Thank you for the fact that they're actually pre-packaged, because we were thinking about how we were going to do that during a Rotary meeting. Anyway, along those same lines, I'd just like to thank the community. The event that I had talked about last council meeting was the Love Local Peace for Ukraine, and because of that, $3,200 was raised for that program to be sent to Ukraine aid as a result. The other piece that goes along with this, they've also raised $450 so far from Costier's potato sale at Long Table. They've donated 700 pounds of potatoes, and 100% of the sales of those will be donated to World Central Kitchen, an organization that's feeding the refugees all around the world and working on the Polish border right now. So there are still lots of opportunities for the community to help with what's going on the other side of the world. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Vic, did I see your hand go up? No? Any other announcements or future events? And I think people will notice that at our community flag pole, we're now flying the Ukrainian flag as a form of support for those individuals fighting for their democratic rights and freedoms. Okay. With that, then gallery questions. Okay. Although, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Okay, did the public get to hear that?
Yeah, no. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg, second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.